All right, the big news is out. Your girl is pregnant.
Woo!
I know. I mean, this is obviously out in my socials, but first time we're kind of addressing this in the podcast. And it's going to be related to our conversation today, but I think, yeah, we're obviously really excited. But something that I started thinking about when I first found out was that I quickly realized I don't really identify with the most of the definitions of motherhood that I'm exposed to or pop up on my FYP. Like, I'm not a trad wife who dreams about never ever working necessarily, some days maybe. I'm also not seeing motherhood as sort of like this expiration date for being a girly or corporate girly, if you will. Um, so I kind of had my own motherhood identity crisis even early on, but I think this crisis is happening at a larger scale. And it just so happens that we, all of us, are on different paths of motherhood as well. I'm obviously expecting my first baby. Mel, you have revealed that you've gone through egg freezing process recently, and Christine, you're 8 years into being a stepmom.
Hmm.
So I want to talk about this topic because there's also a creator side to this, the social side to this bigger topic, but obviously there's a lot to talk about. So first, I want to know if you think motherhood is actually in crisis, and how are you defining motherhood for yourself?
I was fighting the notion of motherhood for so long because I've been sitting at this intersection of like I very strongly identify with child-free content on social, and I'm like listening to these stories of women who did not have kids and like decided to just prioritize different things and live a different type of life. I'm like, yeah, that's me. And then I forget that I have been raising a boy for the past 8 years. You know, we have
Almost a decade.
almost a decade, and they're obviously he has his both of his parents. We do a 50-50 schedule, and sometimes he says things like I might say like, oh yeah, if you want to switch out your like after school stuff, like I'll have to speak to your parents, and he'll just pause and look at me. He's like, but you're my parent. And I'm like, yes, but also like legally or like admin stuff maybe no. And then like it took me a long time to come to terms with the fact that I am participating in motherhood and that I've found my own version of it. And like, you know, obviously
Yeah.
now like I love it and it fits me, but it gave me a crisis for a long time. It's like, wait, I'm a mom or I'm a type of a mom? That was weird.
Yeah, because it wasn't like, it wasn't the same process to motherhood as you typically would. You just happened to fall in love with a man who already had a child,
Hmm.
and it was part of the package deal. So, like, I'm sure it's kind of like, it's like a very different type of transformation into motherhood. Yeah. So I'm not pregnant, I'm not married, or I'm not even engaged. So the fact that I'm here talking about motherhood, honestly, it makes me laugh a little. But like Yanni mentioned, I did freeze my eggs a few months ago, which felt like this really big grown up move. I've always loved kids. I'm the youngest of eight, and I became an aunt when I was just 7 years old. So I've
That's
always been
crazy.
surrounded by babies and be like babysitting. And like that is like being an aunt is actually like a huge part of my identity. But I honestly just don't know if or when I will have my own. So freezing my eggs wasn't just about me being scared. It was more like giving myself options, giving myself some time because I'm not in a rush and I don't want to make a decision like this out of pressure. But I'm not gonna lie, when I turned 30 last year, no, 2 years ago, I because I'm about to turn 32, I felt like I should be rushing into getting married and having kids, but that is just not the case. But I care about this conversation because I do think that a lot of us are trying to figure out what motherhood means for us, and not just what we've been told that it should mean.
Yeah, I love that we're talking about our different perspectives and even approaches to motherhood. Because for me, it kind of all started with social media because I feel like I was seeing all of these things that I didn't really relate to. And at the same time, I was seriously trying to get on the bottom of what I want for myself. And in the beginning, it was actually a lot of frustration and even anger. I know that's a pretty strong word, but I had to come to terms with some of the real things that as a woman you have to think about if you're going to have children, especially us living in the US. And so it took me a long time, I think, to understand like what my feelings are. And I was even thinking like, why do I have to do this? Like, obviously there's no going around currently of my husband going through it. But there was just a lot of negative things that we're also seeing in the media in terms of how it may affect your career and your physical health and all of these things. And so I had to do my own research and I had to do kind of my own process to then get to a point where I could ask myself, but is it still what you want? And find the reasons why it's something that I want so much, and then deciding to go for it because we felt like there's never going to be a right time. But actually, if I think about some of the things like physical health and things like that, I'm probably in a better place now than in the future if there's no
Hmm.
other reasons to delay. And so, yeah, it was interesting because it was part of that process of figuring out, obviously, that you're going to want to be a mother pretty soon, but also finding my own definition of
Hmm.
motherhood.
It took me a long time to decouple thoughts from societal expectations, right? And
Yeah.
what is your actual internal voice? And you would
Mhm.
think that that's an easy thing to do. But actually, when I turned 30 or 31, I happened to do an AMH test, which tells you your egg reserves, not really a full picture on your fertility, but mine was really low. And I got scared into doing a couple rounds of egg freezing, which I don't regret at all. I'm happy that they're there. They kind of also buy me peace of mind. But there, I kind of was faced with this sort of panic of like, oh, if you don't have kids imminently, you might not have kids ever. And then I was really kind of coupling with this, or trying to deal with this crisis of like, oh my god, like I have to decide now, and then like should I just go for it and have kids then? And then like when I sat in it a little bit, I still felt like, okay, so like I still don't know if I want to have biological kids. And it took me a really long time to come to terms with the fact that I'm like not super into that idea. I felt a little bit guilty about thinking about that way,
Mm.
and like
Mhm.
selfish, and maybe like, oh, like these like modern women, like they just want to put themselves first. But then no, actually, if I like look at it, I'm pretty happy with my decisions right
Yeah.
now.
I think that's amazing. And I think it's important to, when we talk about the crisis here, there's the personal, what's my definition of motherhood. But if we zoom out and think about what's happening in the world, obviously we're on the verge of recession. There's a growing cost to having a child. There's poor benefits in some countries. We're seeing some rights being reversed. But then at the same time, in a social creator content world, we're seeing this romanticization of stay at home mom culture and tradwives. What else do you think is kind of behind this larger crisis and why people are having so many mixed feelings about the topic?
Well, mothers, if you think about it, our moms were the first generation largely who would go to work, right? And so what they actually did was this impossible mix of both full time jobs and full time motherhood at home. It burnt out an entire generation of women that will never get those decades back. Like, and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying they like didn't want to have kids or regret having kids, but they were burned out for like 20 years. And we just accepted that as normal. That's just being a mom, right? And then these women brought up another generation where, especially, like, the expectation was, a working mom. And so then, like, a lot of, in heteronormative relationships, a lot of men come to the table with this idea, well, my mom worked and she made it look
Yes.
easy. And then there are women who are like, wait a minute, no, my mom was burnt out all the time, I don't want that
Yeah.
life for myself. And I actually think it's an impossible equation of expecting to do those two roles full time without having your partner really truly take on both emotional and physical labor.
That is such a good point, and I think that is definitely currently the reason why people are having a hard time even finding the right partner, because the expectations and desires are just completely
Off.
different.
Yeah.
They're completely off. So and the systems around motherhood and parenthood are just completely broken. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like you said, it's not that people don't want to have kids, but it's just it is expensive, first of
Mm-hmm.
all, exhausting, and it's often a lot of invisible work, and yet we're at the same time romanticizing it like it's this sacred calling, like which the reality is that the childcare is unaffordable for a lot of people and paid leave is trash, and we're watching the reproductive rights roll back in real time. So yeah, of course people are scared, but at the same time there is this weird guilt trip for not jumping into motherhood with open arms, because that's of kind of like what we're supposed to do as women. But then how are we supposed to thrive in that role when society doesn't even support us?
I want to see somebody say, "Oh no, fatherhood truly is a sacred calling, and a man is not fulfilled as a man. He's not truly a man
For
unless
real.
he
No,
unless he has
totally. And
children."
some of the stuff that I looked into, I'm very analytical. I'm
Hmm.
the most Virgo there is, but also creative. But I looked into a lot of the data and I couldn't believe that like there's a lot of data how men's careers will actually thrive when they have
Yeah,
children,
I've seen
and
that.
for women it's the opposite. So there's a lot of stuff like that you think that we're past that in the corporate world, but like really as you're going through it, some of that stuff starts to become more apparent. Maybe it's stuff that we haven't thought about because it hasn't been relevant for us. But totally hear you on that. Well, talking about the cost a little bit, I've been seeing a lot of even lifestyle media and articles starting to talk about babies as a status symbol in today's economy. Like it's almost like the haves and have nots of who can afford children. Do you think that having a child has become some level of a status symbol? Like, is the one and done niche communities online also reinforcing this notion?
I would say like it's a pretty like privileged take in the sense that we oftentimes hear that talked about in context of people who have money and good jobs, like middle class or upper middle class and white collar. There, yes, oh, like we can afford a 4K a month nanny and everything that comes with having a baby in like a big city or wherever you may live. Whereas having multiple children, if you're lower income, is viewed as a sign of maybe like you're less educated and you didn't make the right
Mm,
choices, and like, oh, if you cannot afford to live, why are you having more kids? Where in reality it's more over like, well, they don't have access to maybe contraception, and they don't have access to the means to like have like family planning that maybe works better for them. A lot of women getting pregnant really young. And so like I think I find it a little bit hypocritical that the society is same time saying like baby is a
Oh,
status symbol, but then it's also a like
totally.
marker of
that
I
is
poverty.
mean,
so true.
yeah, and like I feel like this is reinforced by content because, for
Hmm.
example, there's a mom on my FYP a lot that is sort of like a New York City mom with actually multiple kids, but there she is, making videos about all the different push pressions that she's gotten for each kid. And there's even a hospital in New York where you get a little Chanel pouch with skincare products once you've given birth. I don't know why. They're like little tester things, but like people are basically doing videos about getting that. And this mom in particular is like going to her Tracy Anderson, workout. And, in some ways it makes me uh, feel better that you can kind of preserve a part of your own life, but at the same time, to your point, that's very unattainable for more people. It's like in order for her to do all of that and in order for her to, be able to just focus on things like which expensive multi not million, but like multi-thousand-dollar push present
Uh-huh.
I get is so
Mm,
beyond what most people are thinking about.
And I think preservation of identity and yourself as a woman is directly tied to the means that you have to create the time and the space and the
Totally.
material things needed for you to preserve that. Like if the what you just described, that is a multi-million-dollar a year income lifestyle. And I think especially if we look at the cost of, I obviously, like, I contribute about half of this household's costs, and we have a kid half of the week. I've like I'm looking at, if I like hypothetically brought a baby into this scenario, that alone, just by like maybe by virtue of getting a bigger apartment and the nanny and like necessities, that's an extra $10,000 a month where I live right now. So
Yeah.
and again, like, I know that I'm very privileged in, like, I live in an expensive area. I live in New York, but also like this is the lifestyle that I worked my whole life, coming from a very poor neighborhood in Eastern Helsinki, from a single mom.
Yeah.
And like I worked very hard to get here, and I'm not willing to like change my lifestyle completely and make those types of sacrifices
Yeah.
just to have a kid, especially if like I'm not like dying to have babies.
So I wanted to make one note about the fact that we are all three women from Finland, where motherhood and parenthood, like even though it's not perfect, it's
So much easier.
a very different reality than it is here in the US. So for all of us, like we were navigating a completely new system, completely different type of expectation, completely different type of just culture when
Hmm.
it comes to parenthood and motherhood, and also the way that society supports or doesn't support motherhood. Like in Finland, you get like parents get 12 months of paid leave, and you can like split it almost like however you want. The birthing parent will have to take at least, I think it was 3 months,
Hmm.
but otherwise you can like split it however you want. And it's actually like, even when I was working at the TBWA Helsinki, there were a lot of fathers, at least I remember two or three during the time that I was working there, that took an entire year off to stay home with their children. And that was kind of starting to become a norm
Hmm.
for fathers to just stay at home and also like share the workload. It's definitely not perfect, but like
Hmm.
my sister also, she has 4 kids and she absolutely loves being a mom.
Hmm.
And she's also an entrepreneur. She has her
Oh.
business. She's also a creator. She's also an athlete. Like, she last year she, ran 200 miles. I mean, it took her a couple of days, but like, she's able to do all of this while still embracing motherhood and being like an amazing mother, because she lives in Finland where the kids have affordable
Hmm.
hobbies. You don't have to pay for school, you don't have to pay for daycare, like all those things are taken care of. So yeah, that's just something that is kind of making this whole topic even more complex for us, being away from also our families
Yeah.
when we're living here.
Yeah, and I think also there is this like such a big gap between how motherhood is portrayed on social and what the reality is, especially here in the US. I think that, and it's interesting how like they've started to crack down on this now. Like for example, California now, I think they put up some type of laws against, if you're featuring your kids in your content and you're making money out of it, you're going to
Hmm.
have to put like the kids portions into a trust.
Ah,
And now
Yeah.
we've seen
that's good.
a bunch of these mom creators now flee California, like move to other states like Texas or
What?
Wyoming, because they don't want to
Yes.
pay their kids.
This is a huge conversation, and I think like it's bridging sort of the motherhood piece with sort of being a mom content creator, which the internet is not happy about some of the choices that some of these influencers have made. They haven't explicitly said that they're moving because of these laws, but people are taking notes and really calling them out on that. I want to talk a little bit about, because we kind of circle around this topic of, what's the definition of motherhood? Do you think, as brand professionals, that motherhood specifically is in need of a rebrand? Like, or is it just free game now in a positive way to sort of rewrite the definition yourself? Because I think this is also a topic where there's differences between, the US and Finland, but what do you think?
I honestly think it's like you said, I think it's less about the rebrand and more about reclaiming the narrative, because the traditional ideas of motherhood don't work for a lot of us. And I'm not trying to erase the beauty of it, but I do think that we really need more diverse and personal versions of what motherhood looks like being a stepmom, or freezing your eggs and waiting for the right time or the right partner or whatever, or co-parenting, or choosing to just to have one kid or none. And like these are all valid, and motherhood doesn't need just one definition. Like it needs room for our definitions. And for example, like I've said before, like for me, I'm not writing it off. I'm just not rushing into someone else's script. Like I kind of had a period where I felt pressure too.
Yeah, I also think that motherhood is in dire need of or we need to be able to criticize it more, because I think the moment that we come out and we say something that's like, not like, for example, Chapel Roan, when she came out and she was like, I think all of my
Yeah.
friends with kids are miserable, and people,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
and like people could not take it because they're like, they're rushing to sort of like, if anybody says anything negative about motherhood, it's like it gets struck down. And obviously there's more conversation today around like, hey, this is so tough, but mostly there's still this like big myth that everybody is holding on to, where it's like it's all worth it, and you should be like focusing on the positive, and like just imagine your life without your little one. And I'm like,
Well,
please.
I would say, as an expecting mother, I feel completely the opposite. Actually, when you are pregnant, you are mostly exposed to people saying, like, just wait, it will get worse from
Oh.
here. And like, it's actually pretty negative. And so I think the reason why the response to her saying that is obviously so strong is because the moms themselves actually are mostly exposed to those bad negative experiences. It starts all the way from, looking into birth itself.
Mm,
And actually, I think that that reflects her experience and her circle, in a way, that she only knows people that are
Mm,
miserable, which isn't
mm,
not the actual truth. That, like, there's a lot
yeah.
of people that are not miserable, but they don't have the need to talk about that. And so people were basically saying that, like, actually what we're uncovering here is that we need more people who are happy and who have found their way of motherhood to be talking about that more. But those people don't have the need to do that. So actually the social environment focuses and over indexes on the negative experiences when it comes to motherhood.
Yeah, funny enough, the sister that I was just talking about, like she's actually, she shares a lot about her life with her children. One of the driving forces for her socials was the fact that she wanted to kind of redefine motherhood, because when she was first like expecting her first child in her early 20s, she kind of felt like, like she was super scared because she had never seen the kind of motherhood that she wanted to embody. Like she still wanted to continue doing things like going for hikes, going camping,
mm-hmm.
like living life basically. And then she could only see these moms who were just like staying home and like not, they wouldn't continue doing their hobbies or anything. So what motivated her to create her socials was to show that there are different ways of being a mom, and you can still, continue living your life, have your own solo adventures, have adventures with your children, and do all that. And like, because it's not like you're going to stop living your life for 20 years when you have a child. No, you still need to continue to live it. You just take your kids along. And I think that's like, I mean, it's easy for me to say not having a child, but what I've been perceiving is that that's the kind of key to being really fulfilled and happy being a mom, when you kind of don't stop living your own life, but you kind of, take them
Yeah.
into your journey that you're already living.
I'm super inspired by some of the moms of, my stepson's friends and people in our circle who like have these strong identities, and they're like, they'll still go out dancing and partying and rock gigs and girl trips and like, and things like that. I think that also helped me kind of like ease a little bit into the idea of like, because I always looked at motherhood as the death of death of being a girl and death of being like cute and being able to like it's crazy to say, but like being able to
But
like
that's a
enjoy all of
cultural
those
thing.
things. Yeah,
I think that's a cultural
it's a
thing
very
because I
Finnish
was gonna
thing.
say while in
Yeah,
Finland some of the rights and support for parenthood and moms are better that we've just talked about. I think there's still more of this idea that you have to, as a mom, dedicate your life to your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually one of the positives that I would say about moving to the US was that I have been exposed to way more many definitions of motherhood, way
that
more
is
many
so
types of
true.
It is.
families,
It is.
diverse families,
Mm-hmm.
and just as you're walking around, I've been able to see myself more in
Mm-hmm.
that position through
Right.
just being exposed to people, and a lot of these people are successful people. Obviously, these are people that are still living their life. That's why I said in the beginning that I didn't want to even think about motherhood as sort of an expiration date for being a girly,
Mm-hmm.
which sounds really cutesy and kind of superficial, but I think it is about not changing who you are in order to take on obviously this new role.
And you're gonna be a girl mom, so like that means that you get to be
No,
even
I feel
more of
like
a
I'll be a
girly.
double girly.
Exactly. You feel like a double girly. You're gonna have a new little bestie to do all the girly things like all day long. Like
I
how awesome is that?
Yeah, to me actually like it's like selfishly I am loving seeing you kind of like go on this journey of becoming a mom, because I'm kind of like, cuz you are like one of the most like successful people that I know, and so like I can't wait to see you like sort of navigate and redefine that, and it kind of like gives me also this feeling of like, okay, if I do decide to go on that journey one day, like maybe it can be done. So you're kind of like trailblazing it, at least in our
Well,
little
this is like
circle.
interesting too because I also manage a lot of creative female talent, and it
Mm-hmm.
has been on my mind that we haven't had still enough examples. And when
Mm-hmm.
I say that, it's not that no one's ever been pregnant, but obviously in the creative department specifically, you still see a lot more men in leadership, for
Mm-hmm.
example, when I think it's balanced out across other departments in the advertising creative world specifically. But I think as I found out that I was pregnant, I knew that whether I want it or not, there is going to be sort of this added role that I will take in being vocal, being open, talking about this stuff, because I do in a way want to be an example rather than pretend I'm not, because I feel like I
Mm-hmm.
will no matter what. And so, the things that I'm consciously doing is if I have a doctor's appointment, I will be super clear and talk about it like a normal thing. Like I talk about being pregnant. I don't hide my body,
Mm-hmm.
and the changes it's going through. And I kind of I don't overshare to an extent that would be inappropriate, obviously, for a work environment, but I make a conscious choice
Mm-hmm.
to talk about it, and I have gotten like positive feedback around it because you are still normalizing that in that environment, and you are still going to be very much
Mm-hmm.
you. And so that is something that I'm highly aware of as well, that there are people in my circle that are thinking about this for themselves, and they can at least have some example of what that looks like. Not saying that they should do what I do, but I take that
I
seriously
think that's
in a way.
important. It's so important because especially like if I now think back, I've had maybe one manager who, had multiple children. But outside of that, like I haven't really experienced like having a manager like go through pregnancy maybe, or like seeing that. And like on the flip side, I have seen pregnant women get laid off. I have seen women just returning from maternity laid off, like things like that. And I think those experiences in the workplace have really reinforced for me that this is like some really scary risky thing that I would take for my career, not just from the time perspective, but I've seen how vulnerable women have or can be. And that's not to say that happens to everybody, but I just like, again, as a Finn and by proxy a very like I'm a pretty like leftist way, like almost probably some people would say socialist way of thinking. Like, I don't think if a society wants people to have kids in this sort of like birth rate crisis, like we should be protecting them then in the corporate environments as well.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean there's things like there's interesting things that I've come across as well, because like we talked about, in Finland you get more time off, and so we are not used to necessarily seeing moms even breastfeeding at work, but that's a norm
Mm.
in the US. And
Yeah,
so I'm asking questions like, you know, I travel a lot for work. A lot of the travel is related to shoots. A little bit over a year ago, we were shooting in Bulgaria for I think a week during the winter time, and I was just trying to play scenarios and go like, so is there a service that can help with that? Like, wouldn't you have to stop breastfeeding if you're going on a long
mm,
trip like that? Like, what are people doing? And apparently, there are services like you can get your breast milk sent back home. And I had a
Wow.
lot of first I was like, wait, what? This is kind of highlighting how ridiculous it is to go back so early. But at the same time, as someone who wants to work and doesn't want other people to make decisions for me, if I'm back at work and there's a big project and I choose to go there, I want to have options.
of
Whether
course.
it's as
Yeah.
you know, as an example like that, where I can balance both. I had someone tell me, who's a creative director and freelancer, that she ended up negotiating taking her child with her. And
Yeah,
so I'm talking about all of these logistical things now a lot more, and even to people that are not pregnant, because I think this is really healthy,
it's a
because that is
conversation
the
that needs to be
reality.
had.
No, exactly.
It is so powerful. And for anyone who doesn't know, Jan is actually my manager. So I find it truly so powerful and so inspiring, and something that our agency and just this industry really needs. Like people who, because I'm sure a lot of people have even maybe given up even the thought of motherhood because they were maybe too afraid to be the ones to take the leap and be the first, you know, like creative leader or whatever, like doing that jump, or and they probably just like left that dream aside or whatever, because it is a big jump,
Hmm.
and it is a lot of like you said, it's like this kind of conscious work also that you're doing to change the narrative so that people aren't kind of assuming like certain things about or like thinking that mothers are not capable of doing their job or whatever type of like toxic narratives that could
Yeah,
could influence that. So
biases.
the biases, yeah, exactly. So I think what you're doing is so beautiful, and I love to see that, and I'm like myself like super inspired by that.
As someone who's pregnant, I might cry, so we have to keep moving this along. Um, I want to take this back to how brands are embracing the many definitions of motherhood. Are there examples that you've seen from brands that have actually really done this well?
Was it the Liquid Death commercial that they just did with Kylie Kelsey and a bunch of like pregnant women like drinking from the water kegs? I really loved that
Yes.
one. That was fun.
Our mom group loved it.
Yeah.
I think that's a good example of like getting to an insight that's really relatable for mom, but also not portraying moms in a way that's very conventional
Hmm.
or one dimensional. So there's humor there. There was an insight there. There was a product there, but I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah. Do you remember that last year on Times Square there was this
Mm,
campaign Bobby
Bobby.
did with Molly Buzz, where she was breastfeeding and holding a bottle of formula in there, and I feel like that was like such a real moment. Like it really showed that feeding your baby isn't like all or nothing, that it kind of seems to be for a lot of people, and like there's no right way to do it. And I thought that was like a really cool take, and it was especially in such a public and like a popular spot.
Yeah, that was obviously a huge thing because it got taken down, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I was just listening to a podcast episode of the founder of Bobby talking about it. But yeah, we hadn't seen before that even, you know, a formula brand who's embracing that
Yeah,
someone may not be exclusively using their product. They're using
That was so
exactly.
both, and
brilliant.
like it was amazing. One that came to mind for me that's less of a brand, but I don't know if you've seen Chriselle Lim's Boomo work. There's actually this co-working and childcare space in LA, and I never knew that this creator influencer was behind co-funding it. But I love that there's also some creators and influential moms that are also innovating in this
Mm-hmm.
space. So basically, bringing a co-working space that offers professional childcare together. It's almost like a virtual learning platform for children. Obviously, haven't tried it yet, but I also would love to see more brands kind of innovate around some of the challenges if it
Mm-hmm.
fits the brand and their mission. Bringing this to then pitch on the house, that's almost an idea starter already for a lot of brands. But what are we wanting to see out in the world when it comes to brands, creators, and motherhood?
I don't want to see like motherhood only being portrayed from the lens of mom or parenthood products and brands and services. I want to see more glam and motherhood mix. Like I want to see like maybe high fashion campaigns or even you know, Revolve or well, I'm wearing Gani today, but Gani, like I want to see it girl moms with kids who are pregnant, doing things in the city, but not in that way of like, oh, look at my millionaire perfect lifestyle, but
Yeah.
moreover of like just like being cool and being yourself and showcasing your personality. And I just happen to have kids. I think Jemima Kirk is a great example of that from Girls. The actor, she has a really interesting social profile. So people like that, or maybe Chloe Sevigny, she to me is the embodiment of like it girl mom.
No, I agree. I got really deep into this definition thing as I was thinking about this, and I want to see a Victoria's Secret lingerie campaign with women that are going through egg freezing or IVF.
Oh,
I follow
yes.
multiple moms to be, as I would like to call them, that are going through IVF specifically. And it is a process that's really hard on you. You
Mm-hmm.
may be bruised, and
Hmm.
there's just a lot that goes into that. But I'd love to see that portrayed, like their bodies,
Mm-hmm.
because it is what a
Yes.
lot of women are going through. But that, and then your point around glam
Mm-hmm.
coming together would just be amazing in just showing the reality.
Yes, I love that. And I have another idea. Like if I were a fertility clinic or a brand like Tia, I'd start something called the Maybe Mom Club, like a community for people who are in between. And Christine, you're also invited. It's for people who are not trying or not trying, like people who are just exploring. And it could be, they could also create content series. It could be part education, part merch drop, like you could have some teas that say
Mm-hmm.
like I don't know, not on a timeline, on a future to be determined, or and they could host events where that feel more like a girls brunch meets group therapy, which is kind of like a low pressure, actually fun, with doctors, creators, and people just sharing their real stories. And you would also get your questions answered, and you would leave feeling seen and not told like what you need to do. And you could turn all of this into a content series for everyone
That's
else to be
very
also
cool.
able to watch. But like
Man,
I want I want something like this to
I feel
happen.
like this is so clear and specific in your head already, and that you've got content ideas that you
Yes.
may have to start it. So
I may have to.
on that note, this wraps up our House of Content episode. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review, and also pressure Melissa to start this community. Until next week.